I met my wife, a composed and rather detached doctor, on a blind date. We ended up getting married in a bit of a rush. She was never a woman of many words. The phrase she used most often with me was, "Liam, let's just take things slow." I chalked it up to her not being very good at expressing her feelings, and so I spent 4 years of my life trying to gently chip away at her reserved exterior. Then, an earthquake devastated a mountainous region, and she joined a medical team dispatched to the front lines to help the injured. A few days after she left, a video surfaced online and went viral. It showed my wife, Clara, clinging desperately to a man who looked like he'd been through hell, her voice thick with emotion as she sobbed, "Is this how you take care of yourself when I'm not around?" That evening, I had spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, carefully preparing a special dinner. I stood back and looked at the beautifully set table, my chest filled with a quiet, hopeful anticipation. I found myself wondering what kind of gift Clara might have for me when she walked through the door. But as the hours ticked by, the food grew cold. When the clock on the wall chimed 7, Clara still hadn't come home. I couldn't stop myself from giving her a call. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before she finally answered. Her cool, pleasant voice, the one I knew so well, came through the line. "I'm not coming home tonight. Don't wait up for me." For a moment, I was speechless. "But today is—" Clara cut me off before I could finish. "I'm absolutely swamped with work, Liam. Just be good." And with that abrupt dismissal, she hung up. I stood there in the silent dining room, staring blankly at the elaborate meal I'd made, a heavy wave of disappointment washing over me. Today was our 4th wedding anniversary. We had always made a point to celebrate it in the years before. She was never one for grand romantic gestures or flowery words, but she always chose a thoughtful gift for me. Even though the expensive watches and designer cufflinks she gave me weren't what my heart truly yearned for, I cherished them because they were from her. Oh well, I told myself, trying to rationalize her behavior and soothe my own hurt feelings. Clara's a doctor. When things get intense at the hospital, she can barely take care of herself, let alone remember an anniversary. This is just part of the job. I dutifully reheated the meal in the microwave and ate the dinner I had so eagerly prepared, all by myself. The next morning, I was woken by the soft rustling of clothes. I sat up in bed and saw Clara, her back to me, facing the open closet. Still half asleep, I wrapped my arms around her waist from behind. "You're back," I murmured into her shoulder. "Why aren't you getting some sleep? Have you eaten breakfast yet? You must be exhausted." Clara's entire body went rigid at my touch, and she quickly, almost forcefully, pushed me away. "There was an earthquake in Stone Creek County," she said, her voice tight. "I have to go help with the rescue efforts." It was only then that I noticed she was rapidly stuffing clothes into a backpack. Her lips were pressed into a thin, determined line, and her eyes were bloodshot. Her face was etched with a sense of urgency and profound worry that I had never seen on her in all the years I'd known her. Stone Creek County was in the next state over, a remote and mountainous area. The situation must have been incredibly serious. A knot of worry formed in my stomach, but she was a doctor, and saving lives was her calling. All I could do was stand by and watch as she finished packing and headed for the front door. I called out after her, "You have to be safe. I'll be here waiting for you to come back." She didn't turn around. "My safety doesn't matter, as long as—" She stopped herself abruptly, cutting the sentence short. Without another word, and without a single glance back, she left. Even being as emotionally dense as I sometimes am, I could hear the sheer desperation in her voice. I stood there, frozen in the doorway. Her safety. It definitely mattered to me. Clara and I had met on a blind date. My first impression of her was that she was cool, quiet, and incredibly elegant. Beyond that, she seemed flawless. A successful career as a surgeon, financially stable, generous, and breathtakingly beautiful. After we had gone out a few times, she was the one who suggested we get married. She explained that she was 25, her family was pressuring her to settle down, and I happened to fit her criteria for an ideal partner. It was difficult to say no to a woman so impressive. So we bypassed the whole prolonged dating phase and went straight to getting married, the wedding and all happening in one swift, efficient motion. Like I said, Clara was a poised and reserved person. Throughout our 4 years of marriage, she always maintained a slight, polite distance from me. It felt as if there was a thin, invisible barrier between us that I could never quite break through. I tried to get closer, to be more open and affectionate, but she would always take a subtle step back and gently say, "Liam, let's just take things slow." So I convinced myself that I didn't need some grand, passionate romance. A relationship built on respect, even if it was a bit distant, wasn't so bad. We were partners, after all, committed to spending the rest of our lives together. I believed that with enough time, I could eventually melt that block of ice. I gave it 4 years. After Clara left for Stone Creek County, I was a nervous wreck. I was glued to my phone, constantly refreshing the news for the latest updates from the disaster zone. On the second night, I sent her a few messages asking if she was safe and okay. She only replied once, a terse message that read, "I'm fine. Safe." I scrolled up through our chat history. The screen was filled with my one-sided questions from over the years, asking if she'd be home for dinner, if she had surgery that night, if she'd be willing to visit my family with me over the weekend. Her replies were always just as brief. But because she rarely refused my requests, I just accepted that this was her personality, and I'd eventually get used to it. I sighed, closed the chat, and went back to doom-scrolling the news. That's when a trending topic caught my eye. Like something straight out of a novel. Curious, I clicked on it, and a video clip just over 10 seconds long began to play. The camera was shaky at first before it steadied. Amid a landscape of collapsed buildings and rubble, a slender woman stumbled forward. She threw her arms around a disheveled, slightly battered-looking man and held him in a tight, desperate embrace. Her eyes were red, and as if using every last ounce of strength she had, she choked out, "Is this how you take care of yourself when I'm not around?" Despite the sob in her voice, it wasn't hard to hear the overwhelming joy of having found him again. The comments section was flooded with people saying they could imagine an entire novel's worth of backstory from that single, powerful clip. Yes, lovers embracing among the ruins of a disaster. It was a moving scene. If the woman in that video hadn't been my wife, I think I would have been moved too. The hand holding my phone began to tremble slightly. I masochistically replayed the video again and again. It was undeniably Clara. The face I had spent 4 years growing to adore. So she did have this side to her. This side where she could lose all her carefully constructed composure. But it was for another man. The video was so popular on social media that I couldn't escape it. Eventually, someone claiming to be a college classmate of Clara's commented on a post. "They were the it couple at our medical school. I thought they broke up after graduation. Wow, they're still together." "I know them too. After they broke up, Clara stood outside Julian's dorm all night with a bouquet of flowers trying to win him back. Me too. Clara was never shy about showing him off. Someone once asked her out, and she just told them flat out that she had a boyfriend and they were getting married right after graduation. They were total couple goals." I read through the comments, piecing together the epic love story of Clara and a man named Julian. They were college classmates who got together during their freshman year and dated for 4 years. But Julian's family was poor. His father was a notorious gambling addict who had even shown up at the school and caused a scene a few times. Naturally, Clara's wealthy parents would never have approved of them. Facing her parents' staunch opposition, Julian broke up with her and left town. After reading all of this, I started to wonder if I even knew my own wife. Was this completely unfamiliar, passionate Clara they were talking about really the same quiet, reserved woman I lived with? Standing outside a dorm all night with flowers just to win someone back? I thought about it for a long time, but couldn't even begin to picture it. I went into the study, a room Clara had always forbidden me from entering. Tucked away in a drawer, I found what I was dreading. Photos of her and Julian, one after another, all of them sweet and loving. My hands shaking, I reached for a small ring box that was sitting in the corner of the drawer. When I picked it up, I saw a small, folded note tucked underneath. Julian, I couldn't marry you. How deep must the regret have been to have the ring all picked out, only to marry someone you didn't love? The diamond in the ring was brilliant, clearly chosen with great care and affection. But looking at it burned my eyes. Tears blurred my vision, and my eyes stung with a pain that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with betrayal. Every piece of evidence was telling me that Clara wasn't an iceberg. Her warmth was just reserved for someone else. After I managed to compose myself, I called Clara. The first call was rejected. The second was finally answered. I could hear the barely concealed impatience in her voice. "Don't you know how busy I am? What could you possibly have to say that's more important than treating the injured?" It was the first time she had ever spoken to me in that tone. Before, she was always reserved, never intimate, but she always maintained a baseline of politeness. Was it because I was interrupting her and her long-lost ex-boyfriend? I pressed my lips together and forced the words out. "Does treating the injured include having an emotional reunion with your ex-boyfriend? Do you know your video has been posted all over the internet? Do you know how many people are saying you two are perfect for each other?" The other end of the line went completely silent. The quiet stretched on for an unbearable moment. Then, another man's voice broke the silence. "Clara, my leg hurts." Clara's breath hitched, and she spoke rapidly into the phone. "Don't overthink this, Liam. I'm a doctor. I treat all my patients the same." Then she hung up, giving me no chance to respond. I stared blankly at our wedding photo on my phone's lock screen. After a long moment, I let out a bitter, self-mocking laugh. Clara came back 10 days later. In all that time, she hadn't called me once or sent a single text message. I only found out she was back because I saw a news report about the medical team's return. I went to the hospital where she worked. I had only visited her a handful of times in 4 years, so no one there recognized me. I asked a nurse at the front desk where I could find Dr. Evans, and she told me she was on the 7th floor, likely in room 702. As I approached the room, I heard a man's voice, soft and pleading. "Clara, I haven't had your cooking in so long. Can you make me something tomorrow?" Through the small window in the door, I saw Clara's face, a complex mixture of exasperation and deep affection. "Julian, you're being such a baby. Why did you have to go suffer in a place like that in the first place?" I got a clear look at the man's face. He was handsome and had a refined air about him. He looked more vibrant than he had in the video, though his face still had some scrapes and bruises. This must be her ex-boyfriend, Julian. Hearing Clara's words, Julian's head drooped, and he looked utterly dejected. "Your mom didn't want us to be together because of my family, but I wasn't ready to give up on us. If I hadn't left back then, I was afraid I wouldn't have been able to stop myself from coming to find you." He suddenly looked up, his eyes welling with tears. Clara sighed softly, leaned in, and gently wiped a tear from under his eye. "Okay, don't cry. Whatever you want to eat, I'll make it for you, all right?" Julian finally broke into a smile and tugged at her sleeve. "Clara, you're the best to me." I stood outside the door, watching this intimate scene unfold, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I probably would have never known that Clara had such a tender, caring side. I suddenly remembered the first time I came to find her at work. It was during the first month of our marriage. I had made lunch and brought it to her, wanting to surprise her. When she saw me, she was clearly surprised, and then her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "You don't need to do things like this, Liam. There are too many patients here. Don't come back next time." How did I feel then? A little disappointed and hurt, if I'm being honest. So I took my lunchbox and left without looking back. I gave her the silent treatment for 3 whole days, but in the end, I was the one who caved and made excuses for her. She's probably just worried about me getting in the way and isn't good at expressing it. If that's the case, I should forgive her. And just like that, I talked myself into a better mood and unilaterally ended our little Cold War, even though she probably never even noticed it had started. Now, feeling the palpable atmosphere between them through the glass, I found I couldn't bring myself to barge in. I didn't want to be the awkward outsider who didn't belong. The next day, around noon, Clara came home, just as I expected she would. She was carrying several bags of groceries. I sat on the sofa and watched her walk in, studying the face I had looked at every day for 4 years. It was beautiful, but it felt completely unfamiliar. Seeing me, she paused for a moment, then said, "I passed by the supermarket and picked up some groceries. I'll cook today." I didn't respond, but got up and followed her into the kitchen. I leaned against the doorframe and just watched her. She really did know how to cook. Her movements were swift and skillful, a pleasure to watch. The woman who had never once cooked for me now seemed like an angel who had descended to earth for the one she loved. Too bad I was just benefiting from someone else's good fortune. At the dinner table, I spoke softly. "You still haven't told me what's going on with you and your ex-boyfriend?" Clara's hand, holding her chopsticks, froze mid-air. She looked up at me. She finally seemed to notice that something was different about me. She sighed and explained, "We broke up after college graduation. Running into him this time was just a coincidence. You should stop paying attention to all that baseless gossip online." I nodded, staring straight at her. The photos and the ring in the study were a coincidence. Going to Stone Creek County to help with the rescue was a coincidence. And this meal you made for him is also a coincidence. Is that it? A dull ache spread through my chest, making it hard to breathe. Clara's eyes instantly turned cold. "You went into my study?" I met her gaze calmly. "Yes. Not only did I go into your study, but I also personally saw you and him in the hospital room. Should I apologize to you?" Clara was stunned for a moment, and her attitude softened slightly. "He's back in the city all alone with no one to depend on. I was just helping him out as a friend. Once he gets on his feet, we won't have any more contact." I lowered my head and said nothing more. The meal ended on a sour, unspoken note. After Clara left, presumably to deliver the food to Julian, I went back to my childhood home. Seeing me walk in, my mother frowned. "Why aren't you at work?" I was exhausted, but still had to patiently explain it to her. "It's summer break now, Mom. I'm an elementary school teacher," a fact she could never seem to remember. It was just like how when I was a kid she would only go to my older brother's parent-teacher conferences and never even knew what grade I was in. I sat down on the familiar sofa, listening to her ramble on. "You and Clara have been married for 4 years, and you still don't have kids. Look at your brother. His second child is almost due. He and your sister-in-law have such a good life." I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Did she think I didn't want kids? Every time I had said to Clara, "Let's have a baby," she'd always refuse, saying it was too soon, that she wasn't ready. Now I knew the truth. It wasn't that she wasn't ready. She was saving herself for her first love. I opened my mouth and tentatively asked, "What if I want a divorce?" "A divorce?" my mother screeched, cutting me off. "You married up when Clara agreed to be with you. Her family background is good. She's a reliable person. What could you possibly be unsatisfied with?" Of course, I should have known this would be her reaction. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "I understand, Mom." "It's good that you understand. When will you ever be as worry-free as your brother?" My mother launched into another long lecture, repeating the same tired comparisons I had been hearing for over 20 years. I didn't say another word, just silently despised my own weakness and incompetence. Growing up, I was always the control group to my brother's experiment in perfection. When she was pregnant with me, my father had an affair, and my mother promptly divorced him. She had originally wanted to have an abortion, but it was too late in the pregnancy, so she was forced to keep me. As I grew up, my mother became more and more convinced that giving birth to me was a mistake. She wanted to prove to my father that she could raise 2 successful sons without him. But I always disappointed her. My brother was handsome, outgoing, and got excellent grades. I was average-looking, timid, and unremarkable. Because of this, I took every step in my life carefully, as if I were walking on eggshells. But I still couldn't escape being constantly compared to my brother. My college wasn't as good as his, and my job didn't pay as well. Perhaps the only thing in my life that could compare to his was the woman I married. But now it turned out that Clara wasn't really mine, either. I was always the second choice. But why couldn't I be the one who was chosen without hesitation? Was it because I was mediocre that I deserved to just settle for less? I stopped paying attention to what was happening between Clara and Julian. It was as if the incident was over, and no one brought it up again. I knew Clara wouldn't physically cheat, at least not while we were still married. Her parents were highly educated, and the strict upbringing she received wouldn't allow her to do something like that. She just couldn't let go of Julian, and couldn't help but care for him. And I, laughably, was still trying to keep up appearances and maintain this hollow marriage. Probably out of some sense of guilt, Clara had been coming home earlier and earlier recently, but there were no longer hot meals waiting for her. She looked at the takeout containers on the table, her expression freezing for a moment. "Why haven't you been cooking lately?" I feigned nonchalance. "You were gone so often that the groceries I bought kept going to waste. I figured it's more convenient to just order takeout." Clara's expression stiffened. She looked like she wanted to say something, but held it back. I turned my head away, not looking at her. That wasn't the real reason. The truth was that every time I stood in the kitchen to cook, I thought of Clara, of how she used to dote on Julian, according to her friends. Every little thing, all the ways she treated us differently, were like tiny nails being driven into my heart, leaving it bloody and raw. That night in bed, Clara moved closer and wrapped her arm around my waist. I closed my eyes and forcefully pushed her away. I knew what was coming next. She was going to go through the motions with me, just like she had so many times before. There was never any real warmth, no passion. Pushed away like that, Clara's face filled with shock. "Liam, what's wrong?" "Liam?" It was always just Liam, but I'd clearly heard the tenderness in her voice that day at the hospital when she called out, "Julian." Clara seemed stung by my cold gaze. She suddenly grabbed my hand, her face showing a rare flicker of concern. But the next second, she pulled my hand out from under the covers and asked with a frown, "Where's your ring?" I pulled my hand back and rolled over, turning my back to her. It was uncomfortable, so I took it off. After I spoke, there was complete silence from her side of the bed. I realized then that I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Even seeing my own wedding ring on my finger made me think of the one she bought for Julian, the one she never got to give away. Once the undeniable truth That she didn't love me was laid bare. All the little things I had previously ignored and explained away screamed in my mind. I wasn't magnanimous at all. I couldn't accept that my wife had another man in her heart. Lately, Clara had been acting strangely. Our message thread, which used to be a long monologue from me, was now filled with messages from her. Before, I would have been jumping for joy, thrilled that my persistence had finally paid off. But now, I just felt annoyed. I muted her notifications. One evening, she came up behind me and loosely embraced me. "I have a college reunion in a couple of days. Do you want to go with me?" I instinctively asked, "Is Julian going to be there?" The moment I said it, Clara's body went rigid. "Yes," she admitted. "I was afraid you'd get the wrong idea, so I wanted to bring you along." I thought for a moment and nodded. On the day of the reunion, I walked into the private room with Clara by my side. The first person I saw was Julian. He was very handsome. It was no wonder a short video clip could make an entire social media platform imagine them as the main characters of a sweeping romance novel. But after seeing me, his cheerful expression became strained. There were a lot of people in the room, and the perceptive ones immediately understood the situation. "Clara, this must be your husband, right?" Clara linked her arm through mine and smiled, nodding. "This is my husband, Liam Miller." Some people who didn't know the full situation exchanged confused glances, seemingly unsure why Clara suddenly had a husband. Soon, this minor interruption was forgotten as people started catching up. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Julian's face turn pale. His hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. At a reunion, drinking is inevitable. After a few rounds, someone's tongue loosened. Clara and Julian were so perfect together back then. They even said they'd invite all of us to their wedding as soon as they graduated. How did things end up like this? Hearing this, I turned to look at Clara. Her hand gripping her wine glass was white-knuckled, as if she, too, was remembering the past. But she quickly composed herself and leaned toward me. "Sorry, we forgot to invite you all to Liam's and my wedding. We'll buy you around some other time to make up for it." The table fell silent. Someone covered the speaker's mouth and said to me with a strained smile, "He's had too much to drink. He's just talking nonsense. Don't take it to heart." I smiled nonchalantly, but my attention was on Julian. His eyes were red, as if he were about to cry at any moment. The next second, he stood up and raised his glass. "Wishing you two a lifetime of happiness together." He downed the drink in one gulp, grabbed his bag, and hurried out of the room. Clara instinctively stood up. Forgetting her arm was still linked with mine, I watched her quietly, waiting for her to speak. Her eyes were full of apology. "Julian is allergic to alcohol. It can be life-threatening if it's severe. I'm just going to check on him. I'll be right back." It was just what I expected. I released her arm and smiled gracefully, playing the part of the understanding husband. "Go on. I'll wait for you." Of course, Clara didn't come back. The party eventually had to break up. I stood on the side of the road, staring blankly at the dim yellow streetlights, a single question replaying in my mind. Was there really any point in continuing a marriage like this? My finger hovered over my mother's contact in my phone for a long time, but eventually I gave up. What would she say? Probably that if I got divorced, no woman would ever want me again, and I'd end up old and alone. Look at your brother. He's so happy. Of course, I knew how happy he was. His path through life had been smooth and easy. He was our mother's eternal pride, and I was the useless one. Now, even the one respectable thing I had to my name, my wife, was about to be lost. I could already imagine how she would belittle and crush me after the divorce. But you have to walk your own path in life. I wasn't 18 anymore, not the little boy who couldn't even voice an opinion on his own college applications. Clara didn't come home until nearly midnight. I was sitting up in bed, watching her without blinking as she came into the room. She didn't seem to notice anything was wrong, and quickly explained. I took him to the hospital and came right back. Nothing happened. Really. The faint scent of men's cologne clinging to her clothes told me she was just trying to cover things up. I took a deep breath and said with absolute seriousness, "Clara, let's get a divorce." Her face instantly paled. She rushed to the bedside and grabbed my hand. "Liam, don't say things you don't mean." I couldn't help but chuckle. "We've been married for 4 years, and this is the first time you've ever called me by my first name like that. Should I be honored?" Her grip on my hand tightened. "Liam, I'm just not used to it yet. I'll change. I promise I'll change." I forcefully pulled my hand away and shook my head. "Once we're divorced, you can make up for all your regrets with him. I'm letting you go to pursue your happiness. Isn't that a good thing?" She stood there, stunned, looking completely baffled. "He and I are in the past. I haven't done anything wrong. Why do you still want a divorce?" I looked at her calmly. "I've seen what you're like when you're truly in love, and every moment I'm with you I can't help but compare myself to that." I lowered my head and said softly, "Clara, why can't I have a love that is whole and devoted? Not a love I have to beg for, not something given out of charity, but a love that is whole, devoted, and only for me." Clara didn't agree to the divorce, but I was no longer willing to live under the same roof with her. So, the next day, I moved out and into the faculty housing at my school. It was also the start of the new school year, so I busied myself preparing lesson plans and organizing my classes. A couple of days later, my mother showed up at my door. "You think you're a big shot now, huh? Talking about divorce just like that? You think you're still a 20-year-old kid?" I let her berate me, my mind a tangled mess. She has someone else in her heart. Am I supposed to just put up with it and stay with her for the rest of my life? My mother's angry expression faltered for a second, but she quickly straightened her back again. "That's how women are. As long as she still cares about the family and the home, you just have to endure it. It'll pass." I nodded and looked her straight in the eye. "Then why did you divorce Dad when he cheated?" I pressed on. "To put it another way, if my sister-in-law cheated, would you tell my brother to divorce her?" My mother was completely speechless. I didn't need her to answer. I already knew. Because my mother came from a good family and had a strong sense of personal pride, she could never tolerate a partner with a wandering eye. My brother was just like her, so he'd feel the same way. And me, average in every way. The only thing I had to my name was a good wife. I could only be chosen, never given the right to give up. Just as my mother was about to say something else, her phone rang. My brother's second child was about to be born. She hastily ended the call, turned, and rushed out. I stood at the door and called out to her one last time. "Mom, I'm going through with this divorce." Her back stiffened, but only for a moment. "If you get divorced, don't come crying to me when you're broke and starving." With that, her mind now entirely on her eldest son and new grandchild, she hurried away. I stood there, watching her disappear around the corner, then quietly closed the door. Clara seemed to have changed into a different person recently. She would message me from time to time, asking how I was, if I had eaten, if I was tired from work. It was like our roles had been completely reversed. Until one day she was standing downstairs from my apartment building with a large bouquet of flowers, calling my phone. I watched her from the window and said into the phone, "Clara, don't do this. Seeing you like this just reminds me of how you tried to win Julian back." She didn't say anything. A dead silence spread between us. It made me think that if I didn't take the initiative, this is what we would always be. Two people with nothing to say to each other. She stood downstairs for a long time that day. Finally, she sent me a text. "Liam, I won't agree to a divorce." After that, no matter how much I pushed, she selectively ignored the topic. I had no other choice but to bring the divorce papers directly to the hospital. Running into Julian there was unexpected. I didn't realize that after leaving Stone Creek County, he was now working as a nurse at Clara's hospital. Seeing me, he showed no hesitation and walked right up to me. "Mr. Miller, what a coincidence. Are you here to see Clara?" I nodded, unwilling to say much to him. It was a shame they broke up back then, and it was normal for them to have regrets. But why did I have to get dragged into their unresolved drama? He didn't seem to notice my reluctance, and continued on his own. When Clara and I were dating, she was really clingy, wanted to be with me every second of the day. It was kind of annoying thinking back on it. Don't you think, Mr. Miller? As slow as I was, I could still hear the smug undertone in his words. I gave him a slight smile. "I wouldn't know. That's why I'm getting a divorce." He froze, an unmistakable flash of joy crossing his face. Just then, the unexpected happened. "There you are, you little bastard, hiding from your old man in some backwater town, and now you dare to come back?" A gruff man's voice boomed next to us. I looked over and saw a shabbily dressed, unkempt man. As he walked toward us, he pulled a gleaming knife from his pocket. His eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging on his forehead. His target was clearly Julian, who stood beside me. "I've been living worse than a dog all these years, and you're my flesh and blood? You think you get to have a good life?" The blade flashed before my eyes, heading straight for Julian. Just as I was about to pull him back, a figure shot past me and yanked him to the side. The knife, which couldn't be retracted in time, sliced deeply across my arm, and a searing pain spread through me. At the same time, the person in front of me wrestled the knife away from the man and pinned him to the ground. I clutched my bleeding wound and turned to look at Julian. The person who had just protected him was Clara. Right now, she was shielding Julian behind her, comforting him in a soft voice. But then she looked up at the man on the ground, and her eyes met mine by chance. When she saw the gaping injury on my arm, her face went deathly pale. "Liam." The wound on my arm was treated and wrapped in layers of thick gauze. Clara bit her lip, her movements careful and gentle as she finished the dressing. I looked at her face and asked again, "Clara, are you still not going to divorce me?" Her movements paused. When she looked up again, her expression was hurt. I didn't see you there just now," she said, the words coming out with great difficulty. "That's Julian's father. Julian was beaten and verbally abused by him since he was a child. I was just—" I tore away the last shred of pretense between us without mercy. "You just thought Julian was in danger, and in that moment you couldn't see anyone but him." "That's not it. If I had known you were there, I would have protected you. I wouldn't have let you get hurt." I let out a low, non-committal laugh. I took the divorce papers out of my bag and handed them to her. "It doesn't matter. I came to see you about the divorce anyway." Her fingertips trembled as she finally took the papers. I saw the corners of her eyes turn red as she asked me, "Even if I throw away everything related to Julian and never have anything to do with him again, you won't forgive me, will you?" I nodded and pointed to the signature line on the agreement. "Sign it. Don't drag this out with me anymore." Clara agreed to the divorce. Standing outside the courthouse, I looked at the divorce certificate in my hand and finally breathed a sigh of relief. It felt like a new beginning. Clara stood a short distance away, looking dazed. "Actually," she said quietly, "I thought we would live together forever." I carefully put the certificate in my bag and said with a small smile, "Even without love, right?" I didn't wait for her answer. I turned and walked toward the street. I hadn't taken more than a few steps when I heard her say from behind me, "No, that's not it. I probably fell in love with you a long time ago. I just didn't realize it myself. I got used to you chattering in my ear every day, got used to coming home to a hot meal, and got used to the fact that you loved me." I didn't stop walking, letting her words dissipate in the air behind me. A love that comes too late is meaningless. In the days that followed, I kept myself busy. Even though I would sometimes cry myself to sleep in the dead of night, I no longer hoped for anyone's love. I decided to love myself, and that was enough. But then Julian appeared. I don't know how he got my contact information, but he asked to meet me. In the coffee shop, we looked at each other calmly. He looked much more haggard than the last time I saw him. "You and Clara got divorced?" I nodded and slowly took a sip of my coffee. He laughed, a self-deprecating sound. "I went to see her. She told me she only recognizes you as her husband, and that what's past is past." His eyes were red, as if he had been hit hard by her rejection. "We were together for 4 years. I dreamed of spending my whole life with her, but because of my family, I gave up the person who loved me most in the world. Later I heard she got married, and I finally gave up hope. But then the earthquake in Stone Creek County happened, and she suddenly appeared. I knew then that she hadn't forgotten me. Call me shameless, call me despicable, I don't care. I just didn't want to give up on her again." By the end, he was sobbing. "Why is it that after you two got divorced, she wants nothing to do with me?" I handed him a tissue and asked softly, "Have you ever considered that maybe she's the one who isn't worth it? She had someone else in her heart but chose me because of family pressure. After getting married, she couldn't let go of her first love. And now, it's the same thing. Perhaps in her eyes, the one you can't have is always the best." Julian left. A meeting between two men who should have been rivals ended without any hysterical arguments. It seemed like he had just been holding it in for too long and needed someone to vent to. On my way back, I stopped by the hospital where my brother was staying with his wife and their new baby. My mother snorted and turned her head away from me. I quietly watched her fuss over my brother for a long while before finally saying, "I got a divorce." They both froze. My brother was the first to react, his eyes dark as he looked at me. "You really did it?" I nodded and said yes. He muttered under his breath, "Good. A divorce is for the best." I frowned, feeling that my brother's attitude was a bit strange. Before I could figure it out, my mother rushed over, glaring at me. "Get out! How dare you show your face here?" Looking at her now, I felt nothing but calm. "I just came to let you know. That's all. I'll be going now." Before leaving, I looked back at my brother. He was staring blankly at his wife, who was on her phone. I sighed and walked out of the hospital room. It seemed I wasn't the only one with marital problems. Everyone has their own burdens they can't talk about. Clara didn't give up immediately. She would pop up from time to time, asking after me. I just treated her like she was invisible. I heard that Julian had also quit his job at her hospital and hadn't gotten back together with her. But what did that have to do with me? They were just passers-by in my life now. Not long after, my brother told me he wanted a divorce. My sister-in-law, like Clara, was a marriage partner handpicked by my mother. But after they got married, she was rarely home, always prioritizing her career. But he, too, had once been a high-flying professional. He told me, "I don't want to sacrifice for this marriage anymore." He also said, "Mom always liked to compare me to you when we were growing up, but honestly, sometimes I envied you. You didn't have to constantly worry about being Mom's pride and joy, so worried about every single step you took." Hearing this only made me feel wistful for a moment. We were both just tools for our mother to prove her own worth. Fundamentally, there was no difference between us. After these two major events, my mother seemed to age 10 years overnight. One day she called my brother and me back home. I watched her lips move, probably wanting to scold us for being disappointments, for shaming her. But after a long silence, she just sighed and waved her hand. "Just go. I can't control you anymore." My brother and I exchanged a look, didn't say much, and left that house. We would go back to visit her later, but it was always polite and formal. Our mother-son relationship was limited to just that. When I was 30, I met a new teacher at my school, Grace. She was gentle, kind, and considerate. With her, I was no longer the one racking my brain for topics of conversation, yet talking with her never felt awkward or forced. We naturally got together. It wasn't a grand, passionate affair, but a slow, steady kind of warmth that built over time. Before we started dating seriously, I told her everything about my failed first marriage. After listening, her expression was a mix of sympathy and relief. "Thank you for being willing to try and accept my feelings," she said quietly. I was taken aback, my face growing warm, and I had to turn away. After we got married, Clara finally stopped appearing. One night, I received a call from an unknown number. The person on the other end was silent, saying nothing. The sound of my front door opening broke the quiet, and Grace's cheerful voice filled the room. "Liam? Guess what I brought home?" The call suddenly ended. I had a good guess who it was, but I felt no ripple of emotion. Grace was holding a box of scones from that little bakery downtown, her eyes bright and clear. Seeing me on the phone, she asked curiously, "Who was that?" I shook my head, took the scones from her, and smiled. "No one important. The past is like smoke. My eyes are only on the happiness I have right now. What you can hold on to is what matters most." Clara's perspective. The day Liam got married, I saw their wedding photos on my social media feed. His smile was gentle, but it was easy to see the genuine sincerity in his eyes. The woman beside him was also smiling, her eyes filled with a pure, uncomplicated happiness. I looked up at the wedding photo I had never taken down from my wall. He had smiled the same way when he married me, but my expression in the photo was indifferent, always keeping that careful distance from him. When I married Liam, I thought, if it couldn't be Julian, then it could be anyone. So I didn't invest too much emotion into our marriage, even though I knew on some level that my husband was falling in love with me through the quiet rhythm of our daily life together. I chose to ignore it. For 4 years, he was unwavering in his devotion to me. I don't know when it started, but I began to look forward to his messages, to listen to his little ramblings about nothing. The past I had stored away with Julian in that forbidden drawer didn't seem so important anymore. Living a quiet, simple life like this was good enough. Even then, I told myself I hadn't fallen in love with Liam. Until the earthquake in Stone Creek County, I knew Julian had gone there after he left our city. The moment the news broke, my heart felt like it was being squeezed, and I couldn't breathe. I immediately applied to join the rescue team heading to the disaster zone. I was in such a rush, in such a panic, that I completely forgot it was mine and Liam's wedding anniversary. When I saw Julian, safe and sound, standing in front of me amidst the devastation, all the emotions I had suppressed for years erupted, and I rushed forward to hug him. What I didn't expect was that someone would record it. Liam found out about Julian and me. But so what? I hadn't done anything to betray him. I was just helping Julian out because of our old history. At the time, I even wondered when Liam had become so unreasonable and prone to jealousy. But his anger lasted longer this time. Before, he had always been able to talk himself out of his moods and come back to me. Something had changed. He started avoiding my touch, stopped cooking for me, and no longer sent me messages about the trivial things in his day. One day I even noticed he had taken off his wedding ring. That was the first time I truly felt panic. It was like something precious was slipping through my fingers like sand. I tried to make amends, so I took him to the class reunion. My intention was to put his mind at ease, to show him that Julian was just a part of my past. But then Julian drank. He had gotten drunk once in college, and the allergic reaction was so severe he had to be hospitalized for days. I was a doctor. I couldn't just stand by and watch something happen to him. With that single thought, I chased after him. It was the biggest regret of my life. Liam asked for a divorce. It wasn't a joke. He was so serious it scared me. He asked, "Why can't I have a love that is whole and devoted?" It was then that I suddenly remembered how he was always the one who wasn't favored. His mother favored his brother, and I, without ever realizing it, had also ignored his feelings and taken his love for granted. He moved out. Sometimes I'd wake up from a dream, and seeing the empty house, I couldn't stop myself from messaging him. I had grown so used to his constant presence. If Julian was the great regret of my youth, then Liam was the happiness that was right in front of me, the happiness I had squandered. But it was no use trying to win him back. For someone with such a gentle nature, he was incredibly firm about the divorce. He wouldn't reply to my messages or accept my gifts. Even when I stood downstairs from his apartment with flowers, he just calmly told me that everything I was doing only reminded him of how I had once chased after Julian. I felt like a caged animal with no way out. No matter what I did, I couldn't get any closer to him. The day Julian's father showed up, I instinctively pulled Julian behind me. His father had caused so much trouble at the university before. He was a violent gambling addict, capable of anything. The moment I saw Liam, clutching his bleeding arm after I protected Julian, I knew it was truly over between us. I signed the divorce papers, and my heart felt like it had been pierced by a sharp blade, the pain so intense I couldn't breathe. After we divorced, Julian came to find me. He cried and asked if we could be brave and finally be together. I looked at his face, which hadn't changed much since college, and felt a strange sense of disorientation. Did I really still love Julian? Not necessarily. It was just my parents' opposition, the abrupt end to our relationship that had left me feeling resentful all these years. But I understood it all too late. Liam's departure was entirely the consequence of my own actions. Later, a woman appeared by Liam's side. They got along wonderfully, and I hid in the shadows like a voyeur who couldn't bear the light. He seemed to have completely moved on from me. Along with rebuilding his relationship with his family, he had found peace. He had become a better, happier version of himself. Whenever I fall asleep now, I dream of all the little moments Liam and I shared. I see his quiet disappointment in the face of my coldness, and how he would always pick himself back up again. I was so awful back then. A sincere, loving heart was offered to me on a platter, and I always looked right past it. After they got married, I called Liam once, but when he answered, I was speechless. I couldn't bring myself to offer congratulations, and I knew there was no chance of winning him back. The moment I heard his new wife's voice in the background, I hung up the phone like a deserter fleeing the battlefield. I covered my face, and tears streamed down. He is very happy now, but in that happiness, there will never be a place for me again.